So as Father Isaac said at the beginning, we're dressed in this liturgical rose to celebrate Rejoice Sunday. As you can see, not all rose vestments are made the same. Father Isaac is wearing a beautiful shade of rose matching the candle there on our Advent wreath, and I'm wearing liturgical Pepto-Bismol. So there you go. I want to begin with some advice for the parents here, and right away you should be suspicious because it's like, what does this guy know? He doesn't have kids. But I'm just passing on some wisdom from other parents here in the parish. There was this situation recently where parent-teacher interviews came up, and so this 4-year-old boy, we'll call him Tommy for the sake of the story, the interview came up, and parents were meeting with the teachers, and he's like, look, Tommy's doing great. He's engaged, he's bright, he gets along well with all the little kids. There's just one thing. Every time we have to tidy up at the end of class, he runs and he hides and doesn't help out with tidying. Have you noticed this behavior at home? And the mom kind of sheepishly admits, yeah, he kind of does that at home as well. So the very next day, Tommy goes off to school and he comes home, big grin on his face, and he's proud to show his mom a gold star because he had helped with the cleanup time. And so she was like, congratulations, this is wonderful. At the end of the day, when finally the dust had settled, she had a moment to catch up with her husband, and she said, hey, do you know what happened? And he said, yeah, I had a little father-son conversation with Tommy. And, just kind of a man-to-man, and I said, listen, it's very important that we help with cleaning up, and besides, what would God think if you didn't help with cleaning up? And then this inspiration came, and he added, and what would Father Simon think if you don't help with cleaning up? You see what he did there? I just want to give you permission, all you parents, if you want to use my name in vain, if you want to, improve your children's behavior, this radical transformation overnight, go ahead. The scare tactic of Father Simon. Put me right up there on a pedestal with God. If God isn't good enough, just, what would Father Simon think? Now, thanks be to God, I'm not God. But sometimes I think I am, right? Sometimes I behave like I am, and maybe you struggle with this too. We have a fancy term for it. We call it the Messiah complex, right? Where we act and behave, think in ways as if we have to save the day, right? There's a couple of different ways where this can be manifest. I think the first is to kind of think of ourselves like superheroes, right? Anytime there's a problem, here, I've come to save the day, right? We rush in. No problem is too big. I'm here to the rescue. Go, go, go. I'm bulletproof. It's fine. And really, this is a manifestation of pride, thinking that I can fix anything. Somehow, I'll know what to do. Now, a different angle on this same Messiah complex is that sometimes we see the problems and we feel responsible for fixing them, but we know we can't because they're so huge. And herein we feel this pressure. Like, I've got to fix this, but it's so huge. There's too many problems. It's overwhelming. And sometimes we experience a combination of both. This, I think, Messiah complex conundrum, where it's like I'm pridefully going in, trying to take on more responsibility than what's mine. I get up in other people's business, and then there's so much stuff I feel overwhelmed and pressured because I can't fix it all. Right? So in whatever way this manifests for us, and I think I'm not the only one, where we struggle with this Messiah complex, it robs us of our peace. Now we're here in this series throughout Advent talking about peace on earth. And we've heard about the weight of sin and how that takes away our peace. We've heard about the chaos in our world and how it's hard to experience peace and escape for a little bit of peace in the midst of this chaos. And we have this daily news cycle coming at us where we hear about wars and violence, specifically in the Middle East, between Palestine and Israel, between Russia and Ukraine, where there isn't peace. There's severe conflict. Locally, we don't experience peace, and I've talked to so many parishioners who feel the burden of the injustices here in society, where there's poverty and homelessness, and it's like, what can we possibly do? Now, I'm so glad that we have these shelters here on our property, this beautiful symbol where a few real people are really being helped, and thank you to those. You provide meals. In fact, everybody who gives financially to the parish, thank you, because 10% of what you give, we give away to help other people in need. And yet, it's just a drop in the bucket in the midst of the great magnitude of the problems. And we might feel this pressure, this weight. What can we possibly, because there's nobody here, including myself, I can't snap my fingers and end the war in Ukraine. I can't bring an end to the impact of inflation. And so we might feel weighed down without a solution. Now, I think our gospel offers us a way to find peace in the midst of all of the problems in our broken world. Now, one of the most important figures throughout the season of Advent, in the lead up to Christmas, is this guy named John the Baptist. Maybe you've heard of him. He lived in the wilderness. He had quite a bizarre diet. He would eat locusts and honey. I'm not sure if he'd eat them together, like locusts dipped in honey. That doesn't seem to make it any better. But in any case, he was a prophet, and very successful, in fact. He was a passionate preacher, and crowds would come out to hear what he had to say. We hear about these social media influencers today. Well, John the Baptist was like an OG influencer. He had crowds and crowds, followers and followers there meeting him in the wilderness. And in fact, there were some religious leaders who sent a little posse from Jerusalem to go check out what was happening to investigate this desert phenom. And so they get there and they're like, "Who are you?" See, there had been rumors going around that John the Baptist was the Messiah. And it was around a time when there was all this anticipation, expectation that the Messiah was coming soon. And maybe this was him. Now, just want to pause and explain this term. In Hebrew, the word is, I'm going to try to pronounce this correctly, Mashiach. You can talk to Jonathan in the band afterwards if I got that right. In Greek, Christos, from which we get the word Christ. In English, the Anointed One. In the Old Testament, anytime there was a new priest, he would be anointed with oil. Or a new prophet, they would pour oil over his head. Or a new king, think of King David, same thing. This anointing with oil. And this future prophecy of a Messiah is that there would be this one who would somehow be all three. A priest, a prophet, and a king, the anointed one who would come to save the day. And so they're looking at John the Baptist, and there's some early indicators, like this guy, he might be the one, right? He's baptizing people. He's definitely a preacher and a prophet, and he's standing up to the kings of the day, King Herod. He's got his own following. He's a natural leader. Is this the Messiah? And I think if anybody could have developed a bit of a Messiah complex, it would have been John the Baptist. And so they ask, "Who are you?" He confessed and did not deny it, but confessed, "I am not the Messiah." Are you Elijah? Return to us. No. Are you the prophet, which is a reference to Moses? No. And again, put yourself in the context. So for hundreds and hundreds of years, these people, they would have experienced slavery, occupation, deportation, oppression, debilitating taxation. Maybe you can relate to the last one. The problems were many. And I'm sure John the Baptist was thinking, I would love to fix these problems. I would love to help these people. In fact, he could have even felt this pressure that somehow he has to do something to alleviate the situation. But instead of giving into the Messiah complex, what does he say? These 5 words, "I am not the Messiah. And never have more freeing words been spoken. See, he knew who he was not. He didn't have to put on a show. He didn't have to feel this pressure to be the guy, to be somebody who he wasn't. He was at peace and clear about who he was. Now, to be clear, when he says, I'm not the Messiah, he didn't just then kind of turn his back, wash his hands of all the problems and walk away. He actually said, now I have a very essential role. What I am called to do is to be the voice of one crying out in the wilderness. Make straight the way of the Lord. In other words, my job is to make space for the Messiah. There is a Messiah, and he's coming soon. And his job, not mine, his job is to save the world from everything, to bring peace into a world that is so broken and divided. Now, practically, what does this mean for us in 2023? In the lead up to Christmas, in a time where there's so much pressure and we're pulled in so many directions, there's so many things to be burdened by in our world. I think that John the Baptist, this approach offers us something. These 5 words, I am not the Messiah. Just repeat that with me. I am not the Messiah. I want you to turn to your neighbor and say, you are not the Messiah. Go ahead. Turn to your other neighbor and tell them, you are not the Messiah. Isn't that great? Now, there is a Messiah. Jesus is the Messiah, and he is very near. Repeat that with me. Jesus is the Messiah, and he is very near. Tell your neighbor that. Jesus is the Messiah, and he is very near. And if that truth sinks in, we will experience peace. Just the other day, I had this prayer time where for 5 or 10 minutes, I sat there and I just said over and over again, I am not the Messiah. 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 And at one point I was like, am I crazy here? And I just kept saying it, but eventually this peace started to come over me. I am not the Messiah, but there is a Messiah, and his name is Jesus. Now, I've often quoted Father Bob Bedard, the founder of the Companions of the Cross, this community that Father Isaac and I belong to. And he had this colloquial phrase that captures this so well. He would say this, don't take yourself too seriously. Now, unfortunately, this is something I've struggled with my whole life. I've written it right on my whiteboard in my office. Don't take yourself too seriously. So I'm preaching to myself today, don't take yourself too seriously. And when I think, so often when there's this something that we're so looking forward to and it doesn't turn out as we had hoped, maybe an event, maybe it was your Christmas baking, maybe it was some kind of gathering that you prepared for, and you're frustrated. It's not perfect. Don't take yourself too seriously. Or maybe someone has criticized you. They've offered you feedback that really hurt. Your spouse, your boss, a teacher. You want to get defensive. They have no idea my motives. They have no idea how hard I've worked. Don't take yourself too seriously. Or maybe you have messed up and you want to be hard on yourself. You dropped a ball. You didn't follow through on the commitments. You didn't react well in the moment. You even gave in to temptation and fell into sin. And praise God, we have confession for that. But we can just beat ourselves up. Don't take yourself too seriously. Now that line alone might be something that you'd read in a book that you'd find in the self-help section of chapters. Don't take yourself too seriously, but there's a second part of it that Father Bob would always say, don't take yourself too seriously, but take the Lord very seriously. In other words, be like John the Baptist, who knew his role was so essential. And your role matters so much to work for the Lord, not to take Jesus' job, but to prepare the way for him. And so anytime there is some kind of problem, to actually roll up our sleeves and say, yeah, I'm going to do everything I can to work towards a solution here. And yet I realize that my very best effort is merely preparing the way for the Messiah, because he is the one who's going to come and save the day, to bring peace to our world, which is rife with conflicts. Now, we're beginning the third week of Advent, and just a little heads up for you, the fourth week of Advent is pretty short this year. Next Sunday morning, we're going to celebrate the fourth Sunday of Advent. By that evening, we'll be already into Christmas Eve. So it's a matter of hours, the fourth Sunday. So we're at the home stretch here in Advent. And I don't know about you, but my Advent hasn't really been much of an Advent. It's been filled with chaos and busyness and stress, and the Messiah complex has been rearing its head. And basically, we've got a week to make it count. And I just wonder, what if in this next week, every time we encounter a big problem, we face a conflict, some kind of battle, that we freely declare, I am not the Messiah, but Jesus is, and he is very near. I believe that if we can proclaim this freely, some of that stress, some of that anxiety will melt away. And it will be replaced with this inner peace, this supernatural peace from Jesus that will then spill out into all of our relationships, into marriages, into families, between children, into the spiritual family that is St. Benedict Parish. And it will actually increase the level of peace on earth. I am not the Messiah, but Jesus is, and he is very near.